Will it survive that plant that's been uprooted and planted again? Good morning. Welcome to Lost for Words, where we explore great women poets. I am Sarah Woods, and today we are continuing our journey with this lady, Miss Rupi Kaur, in her book, The Sun and Its Flowers. So far, this book has been an interesting journey. I've been exploring it a little bit different than some of the other poets that I've explored. Because there's something about this book that feels a little more like it is one continuous poem, one continuous story, one continuous song. It sort of has this feeling of like an unfolding as you read it, and sort of like this discovery of the inner life of a person, and more so than it feels like you're reading like individual like creations of poetry. To me, it's more along the lines of, it definitely feels more like one poem, one life discovered, one soul like pouring itself onto paper. And I feel like a lot of people really like to critique Rupi Kaur based off of a very like educated perspective of what poetry is, which is fine. I think there's a place for, that, doing that, I guess. But for me, when I encounter her, I feel like if you come to this book as a critic, if you come to this book as someone expecting this like very like, these very structured poems that match some idea that you already have in your head, that you're actually gonna miss out on a journey through her heart. You're gonna miss out on a journey of healing. You're gonna miss out on just a woman discovering herself, discovering her family, working through trauma. Like, I feel like this book, I think a lot of people like to critique its simplicity, and they actually like to, like, there are whole groups that like, or make fun of these poems or these pieces, these words, because some of them are so short, and they're like, oh, it's too simple. But really, I feel like it's very valuable if you're just, especially a woman, if you're a woman, a girl, walking through life, and you would like to crawl into someone else's thoughts and feel them be honest and in a simple way that you can understand, that kind of pushes you towards seeing how you might not treat yourself well, and that different ways of challenging your thoughts about loving yourself, loving your family, growth, healing, love. Like, it really does have really valuable things in it. Anyway, that's a long rant. So we've been through some of these chapters. We discovered these chapters are based off of things flowers do. And we've been through a chapter on wilting, which we discovered had a lot to do with like heartbreak. Yeah, just really sad heartbreak. And then the second chapter was on falling, and we discovered that chapter had a lot to do with abuse, whether it was coming from a male figure in her life, her own self, abusing her own self with her words, or from our culture, just that pressure that our culture puts on us to be something that we are not, to make ourselves into this ideal beauty. Here we go. We're going to be starting on chapter on rooting. There's something about this chapter that makes me feel very emotional. I feel like there's two major themes in this chapter, and one is the theme of the refugee or the immigrant. And then the other idea that comes up a lot in this chapter is things that have to do with her parents. And, you know, this chapter is called Rooting. And so to me, that's an interesting name for a chapter that focuses a lot on being a refugee or being an immigrant. Because when you think of an immigrant, you think of someone who has a country and for whatever reason they feel the need to leave for another country, whether it's because of violence or lack of food or for opportunity, for growth, whatever it is, there's something that compels the people, these people, to leave the country they were born into. So you get this idea of like an uprooting, being pulled up. They pull themselves out of the ground and then, you know, sometimes even cross oceans to attempt to plant themselves in another country. It's really interesting to think about this, comparing it to a plant. Like, there are certain plants, like okay, like a palm tree. Like, you're obviously not going to take a palm tree and you're going to move it, uproot it, and then move it to Maine in the United States, and it probably do super well, I imagine. And you're also probably not going to take, I'm trying to think of like a shade plant, like a hosta or something, and then take like one that really loves shade, take that and then take it to, I'm trying to think of somewhere really like hot and sunny, like Arizona or something, and plant it in the desert, and it survived very well. So to me, this idea of like people, like being uprooted and then trying to plant themselves in a new country, like it just makes me curious about their thriving. Like, when they get there, have they moved to a place that is conducive for them to thrive, or have they moved themselves to a place that is gonna reject them, or like they're not gonna be able to get the nutrients they need in that place? I don't know. To me, that's an interesting way to think of people as immigrants moving from country to another country. So as soon as you open this chapter, the very first poem, it says, "They have no idea what it's like to lose home at the risk of never finding home again, to have your entire life split between two lands and become the bridge between two countries." I think that's a good picture of probably the idea of being an immigrant. That idea of like coming from one place, you've been in one place your whole life, and that culture, you've absorbed that culture, like that's part of who you are, and then you move to another country, another land, just because you moved to that new land and it has its culture, your culture didn't suddenly just disappear. And so your body becomes this bridge between two countries, basically. Like, it is, yeah, that's like actually very fascinating. Imagine very, very difficult to have to try to merge those two worlds and make something in yourself that you hold on to the things that you treasure about where you've come from, while at the same time trying to appreciate this new place you are and create a life that works in this place. I don't know. So one thing I was saying is I've come at this a little bit different, this book, and so usually I just pick one poem, and I'm just not doing that with this book. And so if you'll just give me some freedom, I think I'm just going to sort of bounce around in here and just show you those ideas. And so I'll stick with some of the refugee stuff and immigrant themes right now. She says, "Look at what they've done. The earth cried to the moon. They've turned me into one entire bruise, green and blue." So you have Rupi Kaur sort of like having the earth crying out to the sky, crying to the moon, and she's like, look what they've done. They've turned me into one entire bruise. And you get this idea, who is the they? I'm guessing the they is like humanity. And then she says, "You are an open wound, and we are standing in a pool of your blood, refugee camp." So between these two poems, you start to get the idea that for Rupi Kaur, these bruises on the earth are places where the refugees have left their country but really have nowhere to go, nowhere to root themselves, nowhere to create a life for themselves. So they're in this middle place of sort of this no man's land, sort of. To me, that's a very fascinating way to, and I feel like there's something very like sensitive and tender and sad about these two pieces, like that visual of imagining refugee camps as bruises, and really the they is the people inside countries that have made some of these countries unlivable for people, the governments maybe. Then she talks, this is where she mixes her mother and being an immigrant. "Leaving her country was not easy for my mother. I still catch her searching for it in foreign films in the international food aisle." Oh, to me that was very sweet, like her watching her mother, like she's in this new country, and like you can imagine her like going and renting old films that have to do with where she came from and watching them just to have that feeling of home. And then in the international food aisle, yeah, if you think of something that's very cultural, like food is like top on the list, like food and music, I feel like are probably the top. To me, when I think of culture, those are two of the top things I think of. And I know, like, I visited a couple of countries, and I remember once I spent about 4 months in Brazil, and you know, I'm very, you know, American. Like, I grew up like eating cereal every day for breakfast. I was a big peanut butter and jelly person, not anymore, but a sandwich person, pizza, like I had probably a very terrible diet actually. But I remember getting to Brazil, and I love Brazil, but I had a very hard time with their food, because they ate a lot of beans and rice and salad, which are all things that are really healthy for you. And I remember, like, I hated beans. Like, it was so much work for me to eat because I really didn't like beans. And I also remember, like, breakfast, like, they would always eat a roll and a cup of coffee everywhere that I went. And I was used to having cereal. Like, I didn't realize how accustomed my body had gotten to having a bowl of cereal until I was there. And I remember my body being like, I want cereal. So it just took quite a while for me to get used to that breakfast. But I remember there came a point when I started to love that breakfast after I got used to it. But so I can imagine her mother, especially if you've lived for a really long time in one country and then moved to another one, just like craving certain foods and missing those foods and missing it being normal for everyone else to be eating those foods. I remember my family sending me like a box, and I remember getting them to send me like a box of brownie mix and peanut butter, because I don't think they had peanut butter in Brazil at that time. And I remember trying to describe brownies to them, and they were like, they didn't know what I was talking about. Can't remember what else. So I feel like I can definitely imagine this feeling. And but I knew in the back of my head, eventually I'm going back home. Like, this woman doesn't know, like, if she'll ever go back home, and most likely she's not. And so you can imagine her in the grocery stores, like, skipping over all the whatever country she's in, like if it's America or Canada, probably Canada for Rupi's mom, skipping over all the aisles that are very like Canadian and like going straight to the international aisles, like looking for things that remind her of her culture. This one is, this one's really sad. This one is called Boat. It says, your legs buckle like a tired horse running for safety. Drag them by the hips and move faster. You do not have the privilege to rest in a country that wants to spit you out. You have to keep going and going and going till you reach the water. Hand over everything in your name for a ticket onto the boat, next to 100 others like you, packed like sardines. You tell the woman beside you, this boat is not strong enough to carry this much sorrow to a shore. What does it matter, she says, if drowning is easier than staying? How many people has this water drunk up? Is it all one long cemetery, bodies buried without a country? Perhaps the sea is your country. Perhaps the boat sinks because it's the only place that will take you. This poem makes me want to cry. Like, like that idea that, like, your own country that you were born into, like, you imagine, like, there are some countries that are so hostile and just really not peaceful places, and it feeling like your own country is, like, rejecting you, and then knowing you're leaving to go to a place that doesn't want you either. I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes me want to cry. Like, that leaves you the ocean, and that's it. And this boat, and that's just fascinating. I've actually thought about that before. I was like, if only the ocean were land, maybe all of these refugees could have a place to go. Like, and I guess, I mean, the ocean is a place to go, but it's not a place that you can, like, put down roots per se, you know what I mean? It's, I don't know. But yeah, to me that's a very sad, poem. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple that have to do with her parents. So that's the other, to me, that's another interesting theme in this chapter of rooting. I guess first, you know, for a lot of people, our parents are like a home to us. Our parents are like a country to us. They're the people that like cultivate a place for us to grow, you know. And so I'm just imagining her parents having, you know, experiencing this leaving of a country to go to another country, and that uncertainty, and at the same time trying to raise this daughter. And this is actually advice she would have given her own mother on her wedding day, which I think is fascinating. This is advice for her mom. Number 1, you are allowed to say no. Number 2, years ago, his father beat the language of love out of your husband's back. He will never know how to say it, but his actions prove he loves you. Number 3. Number 3. Go with him when he enters your body and goes to that place. Sex is not dirty. 4. No matter how many times his family brings it up, do not have the abortion just because I'm a girl. Lock the relatives out and swallow the key. He will not hate you. I think maybe in India, it sounds like maybe that it's common to abort babies because they're female. I'm not completely sure. 5, take your journals and paintings across the ocean when you leave. These will remind you of who you are. I'm sorry, this poem. This poem makes me cry. Number 5. Take your journals and paintings across the ocean when you leave. These will remind you of who you are. When you get lost amid new cities, they will also remind your children that you had an entire life before them. Number 6. When your husbands are off working at the factories, make friends with all the other lonely women in the apartment complex. This loneliness will cut a person in half. You will need each other to stay alive. Number 7. Your husband and children will take from your plate. We will emotionally and mentally starve you. All of it is wrong. Don't let us convince you that sacrificing yourself is how you must show love. Number 8. When your mother dies, fly back for the funeral. Money comes and goes. A mother is once in a lifetime. Number 9. You are allowed to spend a couple of dollars on a coffee. I know there was a time when we could not afford it, but we are okay now. Breathe. This one, I don't know, I really like this next one. Number 10, you can't speak English fluently or operate a computer or cell phone. We did that to you. It is not your fault. You are not any less than the other mothers with their flashy phones and designer clothing. We confined you to the 4 walls of this home and worked you to the bone. You have not been your own property for decades. Number 11, there was no rule book for how to be the first woman in your lineage to raise a family on a strange land by yourself. Number 12, you are the person I look up to the most. Number 13, when I am about to shatter, I think of your strength and I harden. Number 14, I think you are a magician. 15, I want to fill the rest of your life with ease. 16, you are the hero of heroes, the god of gods. And she has a little flower that she drew. For some reason, this poem makes me cry. I feel like there's something very beautiful about this list, this piece, this advice that she would give her mother on her wedding day. I think it's really beautiful that she can look at her mother and see her, like, and I feel like she really, like, appreciates her, and, like, you can feel, like, you know that Bible verse that's like, honor your mother and father, like, you can feel the that when she looks at her mother, like, her face is full of admiration, and that even though she can look at her mom and see some of the, like, sadness and the hard things that she probably went through, it's like she realizes how strong her mother has had to be, how much she's had to sacrifice. Like, you can tell she wants her mom to feel loved. I think, I don't know. I really like that one. Here's another one that is to her parents. This is, I think, to both of her parents. My parents never sat us down in the evenings to share stories of their younger days. One was always working, the other too tired. Perhaps being an immigrant does that to you. The cold terrain of the North engulfed them, their bodies hard at work, paying in blood and sweat for their citizenship. Perhaps the weight of the new world was too much, and the pain and sorrow of the old was better left buried. I do wish I had unburied it, though. I wish I had pried their silence apart like a closed envelope. I wish I'd found a small opening at its very edge, pushed a finger inside, and gently tore it open. They had an entire life before me, which I'm a stranger to, and it would be my greatest regret to see them leave this place before I even got to know them. I really like that one. Yeah, there's something about this that's very aware for a child. The fact that she, you know, here she is, I'm guessing that, you know, she's grown up. Maybe this is her story of growing up in Canada. And looking at her parents, realizing that they've had two lives, and one of those lives she doesn't know about, and she hasn't gotten to hear about, because they were always working and tired, trying as hard as they can to create a life where they are in this new country for her. And you can feel her desire that she wishes, even though she knows that their old world was full of pain and sorrow, that there's some part of her that wants to pry into it, to pry into that silence and see, like, where did you come from? I think that's really, like, I don't know, I think that's really beautiful. I don't think a lot of kids are that interested sometimes in adults' lives or where their parents actually came from. You know, like, when you're young, you just kind of look at the world like, oh, like, there's so much to explore out there, so much life to live. They're thinking about the future. A lot of times, I don't think a child is thinking about their parents' history, you know? I don't know. She says, my voice is the offspring of two countries colliding. What is there to be ashamed of? If English and my mother tongue made love, my voice is her father's words and mother's accent. What does it matter if my mouth carries two worlds? And she called this poem Accent. To me, that's very beautiful, that she can, I like this description of the way she talks. Like, it's her, like, looking at her own voice and her own words and her own sound, and realizing that she's like a melting of two countries. She's a combination of two countries that have made love, and she had her voice, it might sound different than other people's voices because it's not all from one country, I don't know. I think that's really beautiful. And then she drew some music notes. I don't know if you can see it. I think there's more about her mom. This one says, remember the body of your community. Breathe in the people who sewed you whole. It is you who became yourself, but those before you are a part of your fabric. Honor the roots. Like, there's so many poems. There's some that include, talk about her mother and her father. I think about the way my father pulled the family out of poverty without knowing what a vowel was. I don't know, I'm not gonna, this is a very long poem, but just that idea of like how hard they had to work or how hard he had to work, to pull them up out of poverty, but he didn't even, like what you would think of as like common education for like young children, in this new country, like, he has his old language, he doesn't have his new language, and he still like struggled and worked to like not let their family have to stay in poverty. Like, I don't know, it's really beautiful to me the way she sees her parents. I feel like there was one more that I really, this one, I feel like sometimes when you think of a country or culture, you also sometimes think of religion. And so like if you come from one country, you would have one religion, or there's certain religions that are connected to different countries sometimes. And so here she is, and this woman of two countries, and she says, I really like this poem. My God is not waiting inside a church or sitting above the temple steps. My God is the refugee's breath as she's running, living in the starving child's belly, is the heartbeat of the protest. My God does not rest between pages written by holy men. My God rests in the sweaty thighs of women's bodies sold for money, was last seen washing the homeless man's feet. My God isn't as unreachable as they'd like you to think. My God is beating inside us infinitely. I don't know. To me, the way she wrote this, you can feel, I don't know, I feel like sometimes like a spiritual community, like religion, church, like there's something about that needs, I feel like, some sort of like, it needs community and stability and structure and time to like sit and study and like, I don't know. So you imagine like a refugee or an immigrant, like they're in one country that they feel like is basically spitting them out, like basically rejecting them. To me, like, that doesn't make me imagine a lot of time for creating this spiritual life, this studying, this sitting down reading a book, or like going to a service. And then, you have this journey and you end up in another country where there's another religion or other spiritualities, and suddenly I would imagine there's like a clash of ideas, a clash of who God is, and so to me there's something about that poem, the way she's written it, I can actually really feel it. It's for her, that God has really been something that she's encountered in reality, inside other people, in the middle of suffering. I don't know. I really like the way she's written that. I know some people do find God in churches or synagogues or temples or, different places, but I guess to me, the way she wrote this, you get the feeling that that wasn't a luxury afforded the refugee. So, anyway, so that was this chapter. This was a chapter on rooting. Aren't these interesting poems for a chapter about rooting? Because it has every bit of the feeling of like this. It has every bit of this feeling of actually being uprooted, like yanked out of the ground, carried across the ocean. And like this family is like one plant that's trying to stay rooted together and planted in a new place, struggling and striving for water in the ground, struggling to survive in this new environment. I don't know. I really enjoyed this chapter. Like I really enjoyed seeing her experience exploring her parents the way she was in this. I think it was really precious. I don't think a lot of us do that. I feel like most of the world is like angry at their parents, or like has trauma that they're like working through. And then here you have Rupi Kaur, this woman, looking at her parents, trying to explore who they are and understand why they are who they are today. And I don't think she thinks they're perfect. I don't really, but there is like a sense of like admiration, love, honor, and like gratefulness. Yeah. But anyway, so next week, the next chapter, how many more do we have? We've got 2 more chapters. The next chapter is called Rising, and then the next one is Blooming. I'm very curious. So far, the wilting, the falling, the rooting have been, I feel like, pretty heavy and pretty sad. I'm very curious. Like this book, it's like this pretty yellow, sun and her flowers, beautiful book. So I'm very curious, like, if at any point as we go through this book, if there is going to be like an unfolding of like joy or beauty or love or like peace, but you'll have to wait till next week to find out. Anyway, have a great week. I'll see you next time.